It is August 20th, and we're going to begin in Ezekiel 23, but we're not camping there in total, are we? We're jumping around a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get back to Kings a little bit in the end of the reading.
Nothing wrong with picking up a little bit of that historicity. All right, if the picture of the sword fails to get Judah's attention, the following allegory certainly ought to. It has definitely gotten the attention of our panel. In all of Scripture, there's probably no more graphic indictment. Modern readers are almost offended by the candid exposure of two prominent promiscuous sisters representing Israel and Judah. One gets at least some idea of the degree to which God himself is offended by his people's infidelity. And he means spiritual infidelity. But he's going to use sexual immorality as a way of expressing that, because everybody ought to know that sexual sin does damage to your relationships. It does damage to your own body. It breaks relationship with God. That ought to be innate to all people, everywhere, all the time. And so he uses this as the most graphic expression of that broken relationship. Two promiscuous sisters, Ezekiel 23, 1 through 13. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, there are two women, daughters of the same mother. They became prostitutes in Egypt, engaging in prostitution from their youth. In that land, their breasts were fondled and their virgin bosoms caressed. The older was named Analoa, and her sister was
Oholiba.
They were mine and gave birth to sons and daughters. Oliah is Samaria, and Obaliah is Jerusalem. Is it Oliah?
Ahola.
I'm thinking. Okay, I should have read this before. Ahola. Yeah, okay. Ohola engaged in prostitution while she was still mine, and she lusted after her lovers in Assyria. Warriors clothed in blue, governors and commanders, all of them handsome. The young men mounted horsemen. She gave herself as prostitutes to all the elite Assyrians and defiled herself with all the idols of everyone she lusted after. She did not give up the prostitution she began in Egypt, when during her young youth men slept with her, caressed her virgin bosoms, and poured out their lust on her. Therefore, I delivered her into the hands of her lovers, the Assyrians, for whom she lusted. They stripped her naked, took her away, her sons, her daughters, and killed her with the sword. She became a byword among women, and punishment was inflicted upon her. Her sister, Oholiba saw this, yet in her lust and prostitution, she was even more depraved than her sister. She too lusted after the Assyrians, governors, commanders, warriors in full dress, mounted horsemen, and all handsome young men. I saw that she too defiled herself. Both of them went the same way. But she carried her prostitution still further. She saw men portrayed on a wall, figures of the Chaldeans portrayed in red, with belts around their waists and flowing turbans on their heads. All of them looked like Babylonian chariot officers, native of Chaldea. And as soon as she saw them, she lusted after them and sent messengers to them in Chaldea. The Babylonians came to her to the bed of love, and in their lust they defiled her, and she had defiled them. She turned away from them in disgust. When she carried on her prostitution openly and exposed her naked body, I turned away from her disgust, just as I had turned away from her sister. Yet She became more and more promiscuous as she recalled the days of her youth when she was a prostitute in Egypt.
There she lusted after her lovers, whose genitals were like those of donkeys and whose emission was like that of horses. So you longed for the lewdness of your youth, when in Egypt your bosom was caressed and your young breasts fondled. Therefore, Oholiba, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will stir up your lovers against you, those you turned away from in disgust, and I will bring them against you from every side, the Babylonians and all the Chaldeans, the men of Pekod and Shoa and Koa, and all the Assyrians with them, handsome young men, all of them governors and commanders, chariot officers as men of high rank, all mounted on horses. They will come against you with weapons, chariots and wagons, and with a throng of people. They will take up positions against you on every side, with large and small shields and with helmets. I will turn you over to them for punishment, and they will punish you according to their standards. I will direct my jealous anger against you, and they will deal with you in fury. They will cut off your noses and your ears, and those of you who are left will fall by the sword. They will take away your sons and daughters, and those of you who are left will be consumed by fire. They will also strip you of your clothes and take your fine jewelry. So I will put a stop to the lewdness and prostitution you began in Egypt. You will not look on these things with longing or remember Egypt anymore. For this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am about to deliver you into the hands of those you hate, to those you turned away from in disgust. They will deal with you in hatred and take away everything you have worked for. They will leave you stark naked, and the shame of your prostitution will be exposed. Your lewdness and promiscuity have brought this on you, because you lusted after their nations and defiled yourself with their idols. You have gone the way of your sister, so I will put her cup into your hand. This is what the sovereign Lord says. You will drink your sister's cup, a cup large and deep. It will bring scorn and derision, for it holds so much. You will be filled with drunkenness and sorrow, the cup of ruin and desolation, the cup of your sister Samaria. You will drink it and drain it dry, and chew on its pieces, and you will tear your breasts. I have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Since you have forgotten me and turned your back on me, you must bear the consequences of your lewdness and prostitution. The Lord said to me, Son of man, will you judge Ohola and Oholiba? Then confront them with their detestable practices, for they have committed adultery and blood is on their hands. They committed adultery with their idols. They even sacrificed their children, whom they bore to me, as food for them. They have also done this to me. At that same time, they defiled my sanctuary and desecrated my Sabbaths.
On the very day they sacrificed their children to their idols, they entered my sanctuary and desecrated it. That is what they did in my house. They even sent messengers for men who came from far away, and when they arrived, you bathed yourself for them, and applied eye makeup and put on your jewelry. You sat on an elegant couch with a table spread before it, on which you had placed the incense and olive oil that belonged to me. The noise of a carefree crowd was around you. Drunkards were brought from the desert, along with men from the rabble, and they put bracelets on the wrists of the women and her sister, and beautiful crowns on their heads. Then I said about the one worn out by adultery, now let them use her as a prostitute, for that is all she is. And they slept with her. As men slept with a prostitute, so they slept with those lewd women, Ohola and Oholibah. But righteous judges will sentence them to the punishment of women who commit adultery and shed blood, because they are adulterous and blood is on their hands. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Bring a mob against them and give them over to terror and plunder. The mob will stone them and cut them down with their swords. They will kill their sons and daughters and burn down their houses. So I will put an end to the lewdness in the land, that all women may take warning and not intimidate, or you will suffer. Sorry, I lost my place there. You will suffer the penalty for your lewdness and bear the consequences of your sins of idolatry. When, man, it's a rough morning. And you will know that I am the sovereign Lord. Oh, take it away, Josh.
Please.
Yes, please.
What more can be said? God feels deeply the shame and disgrace that his bride has brought him. Her disrespect for her spiritual leadership, her chasing after material satisfaction, and her many adulteries with lesser gods have left him no choice. Israel must be put away until she repents. The time has come. Even now it begins. It is not known exactly when Zedekiah first gets the foolish notion to rebel against Nebuchadnezzar, but it is probably around 590 to 589 BC. When he does rebel, Nebuchadnezzar responds in a predictable fashion about 588 BC by entering Judah with his powerful Babylonian army and laying siege to its cities, including Jerusalem. Have not all the prophets warned that it would happen? He also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him take an oath in God's name. Good job, Mark. So in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his whole army. He encamped outside the city and built siege works all around it. We did it, you guys.
Well, kind of. We kind of did.
Some people in the chat were saying this is the first time they've really read the whole Bible out loud, and I'm thinking to myself, not exactly. There's words that haven't been read, and then there's new words that have been introduced to the language. So,
Good.
You know, I have to say, the folks in our chat, you know, it's admirable that they continue to come to church with guys like us leading the charge, right?
hashtag truth.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I did, Bob, get a little dizzy. Yeah, you said it got a little dizzy there. Yep, that's the excuse. I got a little dizzy.
You know,
Oh,
it really is something, though. I know Dave said so in the chat, and maybe others have done, you know, a full Bible read through. And so I've certainly, you know, read through the Bible a couple of different times. I swear I've never seen this passage. If I did, I wasn't paying much attention.
Yeah.
I'm gonna suggest that that we keep this part locked up. We definitely don't want the youth group stumbling onto it.
So, somehow this particular reading got lost in the cyberspace.
Yeah.
How might the people of Judah have felt about being told that they were worse than Israel? I mean, you know, Judah has been spared largely of the early, you know, infusion, and then ultimately, you know, Israel swept away, and Judah's in this place where they're like, yeah, you know what? Temple's here. We're good. Nothing's going to happen. And now God is saying, wait a second, just so you guys are super clear about this, mad at both of you, but you're way worse. You know?
Right. Well, yeah, and Judah had false prophets that would constantly say, hey, this is a peacetime. We're in peace. Everything's good. You don't have to worry. And that just was not the case at all. And so, and then, you know, they kept on looking at Israel, you know, their brothers and sisters to the north, and they're getting pounded by the Assyrians. Mm-hmm. And then Judah is like, well, we're okay because we've made an agreement with the Babylonians. I mean, they had a peace agreement with the Babylonians that they wouldn't do anything, and if anything came against them, they would help, and with the Egyptians. But that wasn't. I mean, the Egyptians went against them, and the Babylonians definitely defeated them. They were just fooled, and they were just foolish thinking that they were good, and they were not.
I don't really know whenever it's you know, how might the people have felt, right? I mean, that's a so uncertain on what it was really like for them.
Right.
So, but it is kind of fun to try to imagine what it might have been like for them. And I can't help but wonder, let's just, talk about, our situation here in this part of the country, central part of the country. The entire nation is in a despairing place. I mean, we've got political parties removing under God from the Pledge of Allegiance. You've got lewdness in new ways being seen in national parades. You have ridiculous levels of riotousness and unrest and anxious thoughts and evil intent. I mean, there's, how does Americans feel in the midst of seasons like, I think ambivalent. It's like, I don't know how they felt, but I wonder if Judah was more or less ambivalent. I wonder if they just was, well, whatever, we're fine. It's, I wonder if it's not fear, if it's not concern, if it's not any of that. It's just, whatever.
Yeah. And then I wonder, I wonder too, Mark, if at some point, and I would agree with you, I think, well, it's happened to them, we're okay, everything's fine, nothing to worry about. But when they start to see things like this, I wonder if they started to have a feeling of impending doom. Wait a second, God, what?
Yeah.
You're doing that to them and we are worse?
Right. Yeah, but it doesn't seem like they had this real, immediate cry and surrender in response, did they?
Right. No.
Right.
So, I mean, it doesn't seem like they really took it to heart, and they didn't lament over the realities of their brokenness.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just putting, if I put myself in the kingdom of Judah, and I saw Israel getting, what they got from the Assyrians and kept on each other, they're just beating each other up, and I would be thinking, well, we are the blessed ones because we have the temple with us.
Mm-hmm.
The temple is in Judah, and that means that God is more here than anywhere else.
Right. And I think we could probably put that into perspective in our country in relationship to political parties, right? I mean, we don't have a North and South, but we do have a divided country in a very similar kind of a fashion, and if God swept all the red states out of the country, would the blue states be going, yeah, that's a problem? Or would they be going, serves them right? If all the blue states got swept out of the country, would the red states be going, and maybe we're worse? Or would we be going, yeah, that Nancy Pelosi and her cronies are, it's good they're gone. Take California and dump it in the sea. I mean, what would we be saying? It's like, as we reflect on one another, Judah and
Yep. Yeah, because I just caught myself going, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah,
What part?
I'm not going to say what part. All right, I'm not going to get there, but
yeah. So that's where it's like ambivalence, and it's
Right.
that they brought this on themselves, and I hear Ezekiel saying we're pretty bad, but yeah, what does he know? He's just one of those religious fanatics anyway. You saw him cooking food over dung, didn't you?
yeah,
Why would we listen to that guy? He was laying down for like a year.
right.
Laid down on the job for a long time. What?
Oh man, he played with puppets.
Amanda said they likely didn't think they were worse, and I was thinking the same thing and comparing it to the plank in your own eye and the speck in your brother's eye, and kind of thinking about that story like that. They might have been guilty of that, you know, of like, well, look at how bad they are. And then like, and that's just so relative to us
Yeah.
and, you know, the evil that is innate in us. Yeah. And another thing I wanted to just point out, Kathy said that God takes spiritual adultery seriously. And I was thinking that too, like, you know, this reading is so intense, but it's like, it's necessary for that intensity and that awkwardness and that uncomfortability to understand what sin looks like and feels like to God. And so when, you know, I think of my own sins and I'm just like, man, we need to have that perspective of how serious and vile sin is. And it reminds us of why God wants to deliver us from it.
Mm-hmm. It's funny when you watch people hide from their sin. You know, it's like they look on their life and it's like this big pile of crap, and then they kind of put a flower in it and say, not that bad. You know, it's like, wait a second, how dumb do you think we are? I mean, this is really bad. You know, and you know, I think that in this case, it's almost like God just says, I'm just going to remove the flower. just make sure you guys know this is just what this is, and it's a pile of a mess, and you guys are in trouble. So, how can we expect to be treated by others if we treat ourselves with contempt?
No, that's an interesting question, and one of the things I wonder is that if I have self-loathing, it shows outwardly,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in my appearance and my actions and things like that. And I wonder with other people if as they you know become exposed to that, there's a point in time when other people want to reach out and they're going to want to support and they're going to want to encourage and say, no, it's really, everything's going to be okay. You're fine. You're doing great. Don't worry, whatever. But with time, if it's over and over and over again, I think people sort of slip into the same thing and they begin to treat that person in the same way. If not outwardly, at least inwardly for themselves, because they may get worn down with those kinds of attitudes. And like I say, self-loathing is the word that I would use when I think about contempt.
So every now and then I'll refer to Elizabeth as my 8-cow wife, and my daughter Rebecca and Christian heard that first. I don't know why they heard it for the first time this last week when they were up visiting. But they had said, what does that mean? You know, because I said, man, I miss my 8-cow wife. She was visiting out on the East Coast. And I said, Rebecca, you remember Johnny Lingo and the 8-cow wife? And she was like, no idea. You guys heard of that story? No.
I gotta say no.
No.
No, I'm only 37 years old, so. You know.
Actually, that's not a bad reflection there, Josh. That's probably part of the reason you don't know it. But Jenny Pearson knows it. And Jenny, will you go into the YouTube or go into the Google and do a quick search of Johnny Lingo and the 8-cow wife on YouTube and post the link for us, please? Because there's the full. It's like a 30-minute movie, and it's maybe a 35-minute movie, but it's really great. But essentially, the story of Johnny Lingo is he's an islander in and around, you know, the Hawaiian Islands. And back in the day, if you would pay a bride's price for a wife, and the typical bride price was 1, 2, 3 cows. And Johnny was known as the shrewdest trader on the islands, and came to the island and declared his desire to marry what was perceived to be one of the least attractive women on the island. And when he was negotiating for a bride price, the dad was of the mind that maybe he would have to give a cow to have his daughter taken. Um, and then he paid, 8 cows for this wife. And the story is about really why and what that means. But it's really a story about recognizing value as a person and understanding how when we misinterpret our own value, we walk differently and we perceive ourselves differently. And when I see this idea of how do we expect to be treated by others if we don't have the right identity? I mean, every one of you're children of the King, and God loves you, and He's paid a price for you that is beyond anything that has ever been paid before. You are of supreme value. How is it that we ought to live and conduct ourselves when we really recognize who we are in the sight of God and how He has paid for and given Himself for and desires that relationship? And when we begin to walk in the truth of who that is, we stop treating ourselves with contempt. And one of the best examples of treating yourself with contempt is the engagement of willful sin, because it destroys your sense of purpose and identity, and it steals from your soul. You're robbing from your own identity bank account. And I think the better we're able to really capture that identity issue, the better we're able to navigate how to live our lives.
I like what Glenn said, that he has a whole herd wife.
He's gonna get some mileage out of that saying, I think. And I don't know when some of you will watch it, but I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction based on who gets into the room first, that it'll be somewhere between Glenn and Bob seeing that first. But I'll be interested to hear a report tomorrow on if any of you watched it. So capture that link that Jenny posted, and thanks, Jenny, for doing that. Why, once we have given into sin, does it become easier to go on to something even worse?
Oh, well, I think it's that human nature of, okay, I got away with this. What's the next line I can step over? What's the it's and I think of some people I know that are addicted to drugs. They're, and you ask them, what was the first drug you did? And it's like, well, I smoked marijuana, and then I went to this, and then I went to this, and then I went to this. And it's because it got, it got easier to do this sin, and they wanted to just go a little bit further and a little bit further. And that's what our sinful nature does. We want to push the boundaries, see where we can take it.
It's funny too. I mean, there's sometimes the sin is, bigger sins, and sometimes it's just more obvious. What it makes me think of is like shoplifting is such an interesting thing, particularly for teenagers, but I think adults too. But there's the point where you go from, needing something. You need maybe a bag of bread, right? You steal a bag of bread, to not necessarily stealing something for your own need anymore, but for the sport of it. And when you move to the sport of theft, it's not a far jump to becoming what they call kleptomania, where suddenly you're stealing stupid stuff and it's not even sport anymore. Sometimes you're even unaware that you're walking through a store putting stuff in your pocket, and evidently it's addictive. It's hard to stop stealing. It's like that with so many sins. It's you start with something small, you graduate to something bigger, and pretty soon you're just doing stupid stuff all over the place because you can't seem to manage your addictive nature related to it. It's a slippery slope, I think, is the thing that you're trying to say, Linfield.
Right. It is. Yep.
And I think the other thing is that whatever it is, and using the drug use as an example, is that early on, whatever I'm doing works. And then after a while, it doesn't work anymore. So I need a little more of it. You talk about the, addiction, now it's, the painkillers seems to be, really a difficult one for a lot of people. And it's like, hey, this works. Well, it's not working quite as well anymore, or maybe it's just a little bit more and it'll work, and then maybe just a little bit more. And then I think, Mark, that's where that slippery slope starts to take over, because it's not satisfying, but maybe more of it will do the trick.
And how can it satisfy? It wasn't designed to ever meet the need that you're attempting to meet by choosing to. Sin is not a need-meeting mechanism. Can't be. What you can't choose that which is abhorrent to God to meet the need that God put in you. So
right.
I mean, he put the need in us to long for Him, and if we're chasing other things for that, it doesn't really matter what it is. Even if it isn't, the sin of. I mean, we're using sin of drugs or pornography or adultery, or the sin of theft, or the kind of those big ones that we look at. But what did the Israelites get condemned for? What was this whole story about? It wasn't about that. It wasn't. I mean,
idolatry.
Not about prostitution, right? It's about worship.
Yep.
It's about they're choosing to try to fill the empty void with the worship of inappropriate gods, and to the point where they're again sacrificing their children to the god of Moab. It's like, you guys, how can you not know that this is a problem? And how can you think that bringing this stuff into the temple was somehow going to be like something God was going to go, oh yeah, that's fine then. I guess, that looks good on the wall.
Yep.
Nice art. Well done, guys.
Right. Oh,
so I think to the point is that you can, and the Pharisees too. I mean, the Pharisees, Jesus is like not chumming around with them going, yeah, high five, guys. You guys are really killing it with that whole law keeping business. I mean, it's like whatever you choose to chase apart from the relationship with Christ. And if boil it down, love God, love people, period. I mean, if you're not figuring out how to get those two things done in your walk, when it all gets stripped away, you're chasing after air. I mean, you're reaching and straining at gnats, right?
Amanda nailed it for me, in that the enemy will use shame to believe our small sin is beyond grace, so there's no point in turning back. And I was going to say that's what causes the contempt. When I keep screwing up, and then I'm like, man, I don't deserve God's grace. I might as well sit in this, and continue to live this way. And that's a big one for me, and I know for a lot of people. And so we have to fight that. That's where the devil will sneak, is the most sneaky, to make us look down on ourselves for the sin and give up instead of keep trying. And I thought it was cool what Dustin said about like a ship. If it gets off course a little bit, eventually it's going to be in no man's land. Mm-hmm. So the littlest, error of course, my dad was saying that's why we need daily course correction. And I really like that.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that phrase daily course correction is so amazing. It's one of the reasons why, husbands and wives that spend even just 5 minutes sitting on a couch and talking to each other about what's true about who they are that day and how they're feeling that day and what they need that day. If they could just spend 5 minutes, little course corrections over the long period of time matter so much, because we're almost always off course in some area of our life. And the degree we're able to communicate about that and adjust. And that was David's thing, right? I mean, when we were studying with David and contrasting David and his father, I mean, it was like there was one that managed to nail course correction, and there was one that didn't. And boy, it gets harder and harder the farther down that road you go. Mm-hmm. How does God feel about little ones, regardless of circumstances and of their conception or birth? So I think we're tiptoeing into the idea of sacrificing the children and or the world with which we have embraced abortion to such a degree.
Well, they are precious to his sight.
Mhm.
And he does not like it. So there
I was
you
just
go.
thinking about what Steve was kind of pointing out, like I'll just read what Steve said again. Janet Parshall talked with Josh McDowell yesterday, sharing statistics of Generation Z and the issues they're dealing with. Drug use, loneliness, suicidal thoughts, pornography are all prevalent during this COVID experience. It's creeping up on us and our young men and women. And I'm just thinking in that same question, like God wants our youth, our young men, our kids and women to know that they can be forgiven, because they are almost like that generation is like a product of what I was talking about. It's got to be like, you aren't worth it and you might as well live in this way. That's got to be happening more than ever. It just is, it just has progressed, and like probably it's happening in younger and younger kids for so many reasons. I'm sure social media is a huge part of that. But I was just thinking like, man, our youth needs to understand what we're saying here, what Joy pointed out, that God has grace for them more than ever,
Yep. I think I don't know, when I look at the people of Judah, and they they definitely had the upper hand, they thought, because they had the temple with them. But I think it's that leaning on so much of the grace without the truth. Like they wanted to, they had the temple with them, so they're thinking, well, God's still with us no matter what we do, no matter where we go. Here's his temple, his presence is with us. And then they can't figure out why they're getting punished, because God's always been with us and he's always going to be there. But then they don't realize the truth, and God has to get more direct with them. This is why, because you guys were a bunch of prostitutes that sold your soul to all these evil idols. And you became the focus of yourself. Like, what am I going to get out of this? And I think that's what this generation is like. I think that's what we do here in America. We start thinking about myself, and I, and we start becoming the God that we worship. And we need to, and then we go back, oh, God will forgive us on that one. But we never go to, here's the truth about it. If you keep on going down that path, then you will find death and destruction, and the devil will still kill and destroy. But you got to remember, there's a grace and truth that Jesus came. He came in grace and truth. That, yes, you are a sinner, and the wages of sin is death. But because of what I did on the cross, that means that you can have life, and life to the fullest. And don't ever forget that. But you need to have both, for sure. And just like the people of Judah, they didn't think that they needed the truth until all of a sudden they're in exile, and they're trying to, like, why are we here? What's going on? And here's Ezekiel. I can't spell it out any clearer. This is why you're here. Because you thought you had too much of God with you, even though you were not with God.
Pastor, do you want to pray over the church that we really grab a hold of, and even more than our church, just the church, that we grab hold of grace and truth and hold it in tension, and that God root out the desire and longing to chase things that can't fill us. So,
Lord, we again come before you with a humbled attitude and a bent knee in front of the throne room of God, the Creator. And Lord, we know that we are without you, we know that we are sinners and that we fall short of your grace and love, Lord. But because of Jesus Christ, because of you coming for us and dying for us and coming out of that tomb for us, Lord, we can have both grace and we can know truth. And Lord, I pray that we will get ourselves out of the way, that you, Lord, will become what we focus on, that you, Lord, will help us have course correction, and that, Lord, that you will put people in our lives to help us, because we are better together. And Lord, I pray that that we come to you with a humbled attitude and not worship anything else but you. And Lord, I thank you over and over for your grace and your truth. Because without truth, we would not know that we need your grace. And so, Lord, you are such a great God. I just ask that you will help us, guide us, and walk before us and push us when we need to be pushed, Lord, so that we can further your kingdom, so that we can worship you more and more. And we ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Amen and amen. All right, gang. You guys have a wonderful day. It's going to be a beautiful afternoon. 80s, low 80s today, if you can get outside and enjoy some of it.
All right.
One of the last good days of summer. Don't let it go to waste. God bless you all.
Don't waste it.
Yeah.
Have a
Bye,
good day.
everybody.
Bye.